All right. Good morning, everyone. Officially welcome to Tuesday. Oh, this is interesting. It's like into infinity. It's like technology is fun. Yes. Um, Thank you for being here this morning. I did some marking yesterday. I marked your assignment on the worst mistake in the history of the human race. So it was a little bit hit or miss. I saw some things that were excellent, and I saw some things that we were a little off base. It was good for me to just get an idea of kind of where we were in terms of figuring out arguments from pieces of writing. As I say, it's not bad, right? As I say, there were some hits, there were some misses. Now, I'll go over it really quickly here, but as I go over it, keep in mind that the you know we I've put that into the lecture slides, so you can go back and review sort of the correct answers in the lecture slides as well, but I'll review them here for you just so you know. Okay, so and actually before I review it for you, the first thing the last thing I'll say is that I feel like I may have misled you a little bit, because the way I phrased the question, number one, I said, what the heck did I say? Hang on. Let me just look up what I said, because it was a little misleading. It was a little misleading to you. And even though we talked about what the conclusions were for those two arguments, the way I phrased it might have been, I might have set you on the wrong track. Okay, so let me just open this up here. Right. So in question number 1.1, I said progressivist argument on why foragers turn to agriculture. And then in the second part, I said diamond argument on why foragers turn to agriculture. And, I didn't think of it at the time, but when I read it while I was marking, I was thinking, we said that, the conclusion of the argument was that, either the switch to agriculture was a good thing, which the progressivists thought, or Jared Diamond said, no, it's a bad thing, big mistake, right? That's what we said the conclusions were. But the way I kind of phrased it here, it almost seemed like the argument was about why, okay? So I feel like even though we said what the conclusions were in class, that the way I phrased it there might have sent you down the wrong track. And so what I'd like to do for this assignment, I'd like to add like maybe 1.5 to everyone's score, which I'll do online, just to kind of compensate for that, because like, if you guys get something wrong, you get something wrong, do it better next time. But you can't be getting things wrong because of me. You know what I mean? You can't be getting things wrong because I misled you a little bit, even by accident. So I'm going to give everyone an extra 1.5 points, just because, the way I wrote it there might have sent you in the wrong direction inadvertently. So I'm going to fix that. But that said, here's what we were looking for, okay? So the first one is that the progressivists thought that the switch to agriculture, great, right? Of course people did it, right? And they said, you all provided a lot of good premises for that argument. You said that they were, what did you tell me? Progressivist argument? They switched to agriculture because?
Less work to do.
Yeah, oh wow, it's way less work, right? What else?
Gain more food than doing hunting and gathering.
Yeah, you can gain more food than just hunting and gathering.
Yeah.
What else?
You can gain the foods with higher calorie drugs.
Sure, you can get more calories from the land, which you need. Yeah, what else?
They can start to focusing on their crops.
Sure, they have more time to spend on art and literature and free time and all that stuff, right? That's good too. Was there anything else?
They can get more people.
They can support a bigger population. Good. Anything else?
I mean that going to don't have like they going to don't have an endangered animal because
Oh, right. Right. Hunting is a
Yeah.
hunting can be a dangerous thing to do, right? So farming is much safer, right? Nobody's ever been killed by wheat. I don't, well. And there might have been one more, but that's basically the argument that they had, right? Of course, agriculture was a great move because of all those things you just told me, right? More food, you can store it. I don't think we said that. It's safer, more calories, et cetera, right? That's what that argument was. Yeah. And so the second argument, of course, is Jared Diamond's, where he says, no, switch to agriculture, big mistake, epic fail, right? And I think he had three premises, and here's what I think from this argument. So, one of his premises was that it negatively affected the health of these early farmers, right? And he showed that to us in a number of different ways, right? He said that the height people grew to was less than when they were foragers, right? Their life expectancy was shorter. They had enamel hypoplasia on their teeth. They had evidence of disease in some of their bones, right? And so their health was pretty negatively affected by that. He also said that that agriculture created sex inequality as well, right? Women lost their productive power in society, and so we got gender inequality. And then for the third one, he also says we get class inequality as well, right? We have people who are able to put themselves above others and kind of live off of their hard work, right? So this is kind of how I see that Jared Diamond argument coming together. Now, certainly, he says a lot more about health than he does about the other two, right? The other two are kind of very short. He mentions them fairly quickly. He spends a lot more time on health, right? Which is why I asked you that second question about how Jared Diamond supports the idea that farming was bad for people's health, right? And the way he does it is with all of that data, right? So the height that those early farmers grow to, their life expectancy, their evidence of disease, all of those things are enamel hypoplasia. All of those things are evidence that their health was worse than when they were foragers. Okay, so that's kind of what I was looking for there. And then the last part, help me out with the last part. This was the why, right? Why did, according to Jared Diamond, why do foragers start to grow their own food?
Because they didn't want to support more people.
Yeah, they had to support more people, right? Their population was increasing. Nature only provides so much food on her own. And after a while, you have to start helping, right? You have to start putting energy in. You have to start growing some of your own food. And so, in a way, what Jared Diamond is saying is people are kind of forced into it, right? They don't necessarily want to farm, but they kind of have to start doing these things in order to get enough food and survive, right? That's what he's saying. It's a population thing. The more people you have, the more food you need, and if you can't get all the food you need from nature, you have to help it along, right? You have to grow your own food. And so that's kind of what that assignment was in a nutshell. It wasn't an easy one. It certainly wasn't an easy one. And again, I kept that in mind while I was marking because I know it's our first try at this kind of thing. And as I say, there were some hits, there were some misses, but overall not bad. And again, I'm going to add another mark and a half for everyone just because I may have inadvertently misled you with the way I phrased question number one. So is that okay for now? Can we leave that and carry on? Are we all right? Okay. I'll try to come up with another assignment in short order so that we can do something different and maybe practice that skill a little bit more, but in a different way. Sometimes it's difficult to read read someone's argument and sort of pull it out. Especially, this is the tricky part. This is the tricky part, is that finding something that is well argued and kind of scientific, but isn't way over our heads, right? Like, I don't want to give you a university level research paper. It's too much for this class for right now, right? But it's tough to find something that is enough that's at our kind of level, right? And so Jared Diamond is good because he, writes in a very accessible way. He writes for normal people. He doesn't write for, egghead scientists. But in the process, sometimes it's a little more difficult to pull out his argument because he's almost telling you a bit of a story, right? He's more telling you a story, and his argument is in there, but you have to figure it out. So again, it's a difficult skill, but we'll try to get more practice on it, and don't be discouraged, because I think for the first time out of the gate, I think we did pretty good. Cool? Everyone all right? You're not dejected or demoralized? Not yet?
Can we get like extra credits for like for another homeworks to like?
Well, I think that's my plan, is to give you something else so we can, get the taste of that out of our mouth if we want to. Yeah, that's my plan. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for now. And we'll go back to, we'll go back to what we're talking about yesterday. So, yes, so we heard a little bit about the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? This is our oldest surviving piece of literature on the planet, right? Certainly there were stories before Gilgamesh, right? Probably hundreds and even thousands of years before Gilgamesh, people were gathering around fires at night and telling stories to each other. I absolutely guarantee you that they were. But unfortunately, we don't know what those stories were because there was no writing, right? But now, finally, here in Mesopotamia, people start writing things down. We finally know what people have been thinking about and what kind of stories they've been telling. And so this story of Gilgamesh is a hero story, right? He's the hero, he's the king of Uruk, and he goes on a few adventures, right? We heard about those yesterday when we heard about the myth from Mike Rugnetta in the video. Do you remember some of the things that Gilgamesh did? Can you remind me?
I think he went to the jungle with his friend.
Yeah.
And fight with something we got. I think it was a lion.
Yeah.
It was 50% lion and 50% human.
Yeah.
And he fights with that, and finally he won, and he got its head with, and brought it to the home
Yep.
to show to the people.
Right. So.
Then I think can we?
Yeah.
Then he's going to be like something like Lord, and he gets married with one. Can say like some god. Yeah, and whenever he like married with him, he sacrificed some animals for God, and then is it true?
Not quite. One of the adventures is that he sets off into the forest with his friend Enkidu, right? They go off to kill the Humbaba, this sort of mythical lion, snake, bird creature, whatever the heck it is. He goes off to kill it. They do, right? They kill it. They bring its head back to the city in triumph, right? And so, yes, that happens. And then he does meet the goddess Ishtar. And what does she want? Yeah, she wants to marry Gilgamesh. And what does he say?
But he didn't accept it.
He did not accept her proposal, right? Then what happened?
Then the goddess got angry and also wants to kill Enkidu. But Enkidu kills the bulls and also hits the goddess, that makes the goddess angry. So the goddess possesses Enkidu, and Enkidu died.
Yeah, they have a little bit of a conflict over this refused proposal, right? And as a result, his friend Enkidu is struck down by Ishtar and dies, right? And that kind of leads Gilgamesh to go on another adventure, right? What's the adventure this time? Yeah, finding the secret of immortality, the secret of everlasting life, right? What does he do? This is a stranger story, I think, but what happens? He goes to meet that guy? Yeah, he enters the underworld, right? He roams off, he enters the underworld, and he finds this guy, Utnapishtim. Right.
And then after he got that, he lost it.
Right. So, yeah, he goes to meet Utnapishtim, who has the gods have given him immortality, right? And Utnapishtim says, okay, if you want to be immortal, you have to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. Gilgamesh falls asleep immediately, fails, right? But Utnapishtim says, but okay, fine, but if you want immortality, you have to find this plant, right? So Gilgamesh goes out under the water, finds the plant, carries it home, but then on the way, he decides to have a bath, right? And while he's bathing, a snake comes up and takes the plant, and Gilgamesh is left. Does what? What do you think? I think this legend, or I think this myth talks about Gilgamesh, but it does another important thing, is that it explains why things are the way they are. And so, is a snake not immortal? Because every time it gets kind of old, it sheds its skin, and it is kind of reborn, and it looks young again, right? And so, this myth tells us not only about Gilgamesh, but why snakes shed their skin, right? Because that snake took that immortality plant. So the snake is, in a way, immortal. So to answer your question, Felicia, yeah, in a way. Right, so he finally comes back, right, and he realizes that, he's mortal like the rest of us, right? And so eventually, they don't talk about this in the video, eventually Gilgamesh does die, and actually the people are quite sad, right? They have a big funeral for him, everyone's crying because King Gilgamesh is dead. It's a whole thing, right? So he's kind of come from an awful person, right? At the beginning of the story, he's a bad king, he disrespects the gods, he goes around having sex with other people's wives, right? And nobody likes that. And then he winds up being a better guy at the end. Right? So we also said that this is the type of, oh, there he is. We saw him yesterday, and we saw this. This is a type of story that we'll refer to as myth. Okay, and so myths are, again, stories that are passed down from generation to generation, okay? They usually have some aspect of the fantastic, right? So there's something about them that is, there's like supernatural powers, or there's gods, or there's monsters, or there's people with superpowers, or they're demigods, or they've been bitten by a radioactive spider, or whatever it is. There's some sort of element of the fantastic, right? There's something outside of the normal. And again, they usually contain some kind of lesson or moral or cultural value, right? Something that we need to learn from the story. Right? Do you think that there are can you think of any modern myths that we have that fit those criteria? Modern stories?
You say that, like, say some example of those stories.
Yeah. A modern myth. Not an ancient one. What's that? I can't hear you.
Is there a modern one?
Sure. Do we have stories? Do we have stories that we pass down from generation to generation that contain some aspect of the fantastic and that contain a lesson or a moral? Something we should learn. You're thinking too hard. Of course. What? Give me an example. There's tons of them. Any Harry Potter fans? No Harry Potter fans in here?
Can you say about the content, the complements in the story, or maybe it will be a myth?
Well, no, because myths are usually not true from like a purely factual basis, right? So if we look at Gilgamesh here, there's no such thing as a Humbaba, right? Gilgamesh may have existed, but he wasn't a demigod because there's no such thing as demigods. He didn't have superhuman strength because people don't have superhuman strength, right? So Gilgamesh might have existed, but then there's a lot of fiction on top of it, right? A lot of things that just didn't really happen. So here we're looking at stories that are fictional, right? That didn't really happen, but we still pass down.
So in the modern life, I think you will not find any myth in
No?
modern life.
There's tons of them, my friend. Tons of them.
Oh shit, it's only fictional stuff.
Yeah, they're fictional. Yeah. Harry Potter is a perfect example, right? Even if you're not a fan, we all kind of know about Harry Potter, right? Right? Yeah, we all know who Harry Potter is. Are those stories passed down from generation to generation? I don't know. I think there are people that read those books as kids that are now reading those books to their kids. I think that's probably true. Is there some aspect of the what? What?
May I say
Yeah.
something? It's not like about generation. It's about like 40 or 50 years. In generation, it's about 100 years. Yeah.
True, but what we're talking about here is passing down from one generation to another, right? So from parents to children,
I got it.
yeah. So Harry Potter is definitely being passed down to people's children. Does it contain an aspect of the fantastic?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? There's wizards and magic and monsters and all kinds of weird things, right? Does it contain a lesson? No? There's no kind of cultural values or things that people need to learn? Don't know. I guess if you don't know the stories very well, maybe not. There is, right? What about some of the Marvel movies?
Like
Right.
Star Wars.
What, Star Wars?
It's not a generation to generation, is it?
Yeah, sure it is. Yeah. People, because those movies are actually now getting old, right? They're 40, are they 50 years old now? No, they're 40 years old, the original Star Wars movies, right? So, yeah, have people's parents and kids and then grandkids seen Star Wars?
We can say like for Disney and Cinderella's movies.
Sure. Sure, lots of Disney movies passed down from generation to generation, contain some element of the fantastic, right? Whether they're superpowers or talking animals or whatever it is, right? Do they contain a lesson or a moral? Yeah, right? So we've got lots of modern myths, right?
Can we call a Robin Hood story as a myth?
Sure. Sure, Robin Hood, the Robin Hood story is probably 400 or 500 years old.
But it's real.
Well, it's tough to know. It's tough to know how real it is, right? It's set in a real place, right? But we're not sure how historically accurate it is. But it's a little embellished, right? It's a little embellished. So I think it's still a myth. I think it's still a myth. When I was a kid, personal favorite was Spider-Man. Spider-Man's a modern myth, right? Is it passed down generation to generation? Yeah. How many times have we rebooted Spider-Man now? Right? Never mind in the comics, but even in movies, right? Is there an aspect of the fantastic? Absolutely, right? Does it contain a lesson or a moral? Yeah, right? Absolutely. So there's tons of these. And so my point here is that, the ancient Sumerians are not so different from us in this regard. The Epic of Gilgamesh is a weird story, right? And I think hearing about it, we're like, yeah, this is a bizarre story to hear. But, is it more strange than a kid being bitten by a spider and then getting spider powers while still going to high school? And having to deal with his aunt and getting bullied at school. Like, is that any stranger than Gilgamesh? No, right? So yeah, my point here is that the Sumerians are not so different from us, right? They're telling stories for the same kind of stories for the same reason, right? Which is kind of interesting, is it not?
Yeah.
Again, they didn't have movies or CGI or anything like that, but they did have stories, and they were able to tell them, right, over and over and over again. Which kind of leads me to what I want to talk about today. So this is kind of interesting, right? Because we've gone back, we're probably 5,000 or 6,000 years in the past, and we're finding that humans are doing something very similar to us, right? They're telling stories to each other, much for the same reason that we tell stories to ourselves, right? And is that an important thing for humans? And so, to talk about this, what I want to do, not Mike Rugnetta, sorry, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Oh yeah. Here. I want to talk about this guy. He's written a book, he wrote a book in the past called The Storytelling Animal, Jonathan Gottschall. It's still on my list of things to read, which I can't seem to make much progress on, but it's on the list. And his book talks about the sort of act of storytelling. And, and his point here is not that it's just something humans do for fun, but actually that it is a critically important part of actually who we are as a species, right? So remember at the beginning of this class when I said, what's a human, right? And you told me that humans are, we're intelligent and we have feelings and we can communicate in language and, we use tools and technology, and you told me all of those things. But Jonathan is saying, hey, something that should be on that list is we are storytellers. Humans are things that make stories. Okay? And so, obviously, I'm not going to make you read this whole book. That would be awful. But I will show you a TED Talk with Jonathan Gottschall, and he's explaining kind of what his book is about. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting because, again, story is an important part of all of our lives. Put up your hand if you listen to music. Okay? Put up your hand if you watch television shows or movies. Put up your hand if you play video games. Yeah, all of those are stories, right? Songs are stories. Television is stories. Movie is stories. Video games are stories, right? All of those things are story-based, right? And so it's interesting to kind of think about why and how this is so important to us as a species. So what I'll do here is I'm just going to, for online people, I'm just going to dump the video link into the live chat. So there it is. We're going to watch the talk in class here. And what I want you to pay attention to is just two questions, okay? First question is, why do humans tell each other stories, okay? Why do we do this thing? And second of all, what happens in a person's brain when they are engaged with story, okay? So while humans are reading a story or watching a story on the screen, what's happening up here. Okay? 2 simple questions. So, online people, I'll turn you loose to watch that video. Again, the link is right here in the live chat. And I will, yeah, and we'll be back after the video and we'll talk about these questions and other things as well. Okay? So, see you shortly. Very interesting, yes? So, let's see. Do you want to take a little break before we talk about this? You don't want to take a break? Okay. Let's talk about it then. So, why do humans tell each other stories? What does Jonathan tell us? Yeah. So it's certainly something we like to do, right? He says when we get together with friends, that's what you do, right? You tell each other stories about what happened to you today, or this one time the same thing happened to me, and you tell them a story from the past.
Because we can say the people only like to say the experience of each other.
Yeah, people like to share their experience with each other, right? Also true, yeah.
To
What?
like get a good sense from the like friends, the family, and get communicate with each other.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Why else? Why else do we tell each other stories? To connect? Yeah. Okay, good. Good. Why else? To connect, to share, to entertain.
Like to give some like let's say science, cultures, like to yes, say them to their like family or their friends to give their let's say nothing says going to like true like
Well, it's often a way that we pass information to one another, right? We pass it through story, right? If you want to tell someone, if you want to give them some advice, usually you tell them a story first, right? You say, well, this one time this happened to me, and then, this was what happened, this is the story, and so I think you should do this or whatever because you're in a similar situation. But we always kind of start out with the story, right? Why else do we tell each other stories?
Maybe sometimes we can sense the emotions of each other with telling them stories, and maybe sometimes we can give them give them energy to do something that we did as past. It was the same activity as we did past.
Right?
Maybe we can be a model for them to like you.
Yes, stories inspire people, right? Stories inspire people to, to change how they think or how they feel, or to sort of get the courage to maybe do something that maybe they didn't have the courage to before. Definitely. Why else? Those are all true. Why else? Isn't it what?
Behavior, human being, and they're better in a group of people. We start to talk about stuff.
Definitely. But I guess Jonathan's question is that we don't simply exchange information, right? We don't just simply tell each other information. We encode that information in a story format, right? We could just tell each other facts all day long, right? We could just sit down with our friends and just say, fact, blah, 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 fact, blah, blah. But we don't do that. That's bizarre, right? We tell each other stories, right? We share our experiences. And Jonathan here is kind of saying that not only do we want to, or do we like to, or sometimes it's useful, but he's actually saying that we need to, right? We are driven to create story and to think of our lives and things that happen to us as some kind of a story, right? Did you see that little geometric film he was showing behind him? You probably just saw part of it. You didn't see the whole thing. But did you, I could show you the whole thing, but did you find yourself did you see a story in it? With the little triangle and the big triangle and and the big triangle was picking on the little triangle, and then the little circle got trapped in the box with the big triangle, but then the little triangle rescued the circle, and then they ran away. Yeah, like it's just geometric shapes, right? There's nothing there, but you see it, and suddenly your brain is trying to figure it out. They're like, oh, what's the story? And very quickly, your brain invents a story that suits what you're seeing, even though you're just seeing geometric shapes. You're not seeing anything, right? But your brain wants to create story, right? He says, what are dreams, right? You go to sleep, and what does your brain do? It stays up all night telling itself stories, right? And so, no? It, yeah, and the stories are bizarre sometimes, right? They're very strange. They make no sense at all. But your brain is doing it nonetheless, right? And so Jonathan is not just saying that, yes, we do tell stories to others. It's a way to share information and inspire and entertain and all of that stuff and to connect with people. But he says that story is actually, we need story to sort of understand our lives, right? We put information into a story so that it makes sense to us, right? And so he's not just saying that story is a fun thing that we do. He's saying that it's actually, we think in story, right? We think about things in the framework of story. And that's how we kind of make sense of things. Remember when I told you earlier that, to be human is to be a maker of meaning, right? Humans want to give meanings to things. And part of the way we do that is with story, right? How does this work as a story, right? How do we understand things as a story?
And for like you say about a story that shows like triangle and mathematics
Yeah.
shapes, we can each have a different, interpretation from this, and the story is like that. Our brain can go, like each brain can go in different way
Exactly.
to understand it.
Yeah, and that little geometric test that they showed to their psychological test, yeah, people had slightly different variations, right? They saw a slightly different story. But it doesn't matter because almost everyone saw a story of some sort, right? Only 2 or 3 people looked at it and said, yeah, I see geometric shapes. There's a triangle, there's a circle, you're moving them around. That's what I see, right? Everyone else said, no, I see a story. This is what's happening, right? And they described the story that, again, it wasn't given to them. They created it, right? They saw things moving around and they created a story of their own, right? And sometimes it was a little different than the person next to them. That's okay. But the point is, they created that story, right? And very quickly here, what's going on in people's brains while they're engaged with story?
You know,
They what?
Try to repeat it.
They tend to repeat it,
Yeah, repeat those stories.
like pass them on. Okay, definitely. That's definitely true.
can
Here, I think they imagine there's a story in your brain and it makes them maybe in a real situation.
Yeah.
It makes them a real story for them. And based on we choose the stories with our behaviors.
Yep.
It can be different from the others. Maybe you can think anything else about the story.
True. There can be definitely different reactions to stories or to events in a story, right? That's actually part of the fun of discussing a movie or television shows with your friends, right? To see if they interpreted the story or felt about the story the same way that you did, right? But what's going on in these people's brains when they do the MRI scan?
Got attracted to the story when
They're-
they did it, like
They're what?
they got attracted.
Affected, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the parts of the brain that's actually working are the part is you feeling it, right? So he says, if you see someone on, in a movie or a television show and something very sad has happened and the character is quite sad, the part of your brain that's kind of activated is not the part that's like watching someone be sad. Oh, there's a sad person. It's the part of your brain that is sad, right? So you are sad with them at the same time, right? Which is incredible, right? Because again, he says we're all sophisticated, right? You guys watch movies, they're all actors, right? There's a script and a set and a director and cameras. It's all fake, right? None of it's real. But you have a real feeling anyway, right? You have this feeling, and that's what Jonathan says is quite amazing, is that our brains actually react to what's going on in the story almost whether we want to or not, right? Look at all those people that went to the horror movie or any horror movie, Paranormal Activity, right? I'm sure they all went in thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to be real cool during this movie. And the next thing you know, they're all screaming and they're going, ah, they're freaking out. They don't do it on purpose, but they do it because their brain is feeling exactly what's going on the screen, right? They're reacting as if they were in danger. And of course, they know they're not. They know they're in a movie theater. They know it's all fake. It's all in good fun. But those parts of your brain don't know, right? And they react as if the real thing was happening, right? Whether it's a scary thing or a happy thing or a sad thing or an exciting thing, your brain, parts of your brain don't quite know the difference between reality and fantasy, right? And so you feel the same things as the character feels, which is incredible, right? Because this is a way in which humans can communicate with each other on an emotional level, right? If you tell the story well enough, you can make people feel whatever you want, right? And we've seen that, right? We've seen movies that we really like where, there's scenes that are really sad or really happy or really exciting or that we love, right? And we feel it. And, the writer, the teller of the story can take an emotion and make you feel it, right? If they tell you the story the right way, they can make you feel that feeling too, which is
Simulates the emotions by telling stories.
yeah, right? But how else can we really do that as humans? Can I just tell you to be happy and you'd be happy?
No.
Tafadzwa, be happy. Doesn't work that way, right? You can't just tell people to feel something, but you can use story to do that, right? And it's very interesting that that's the way it works with humans, that stories are the way that we are able to share that information with each other, right? And again, we're doing it today, but they were doing it thousands of years ago, right? The Epic of Gilgamesh was meant to inspire certain feelings, right? And again, the way that Mike Rugnetta told it maybe it didn't work that way, but for the Sumerians it would have, right? They would have loved to hear that story. That's why they told it so many times, right? They loved that story.
Yeah, and if we're talking medically, which emotion we get from the movies, we are get emotion with organ in our brain, it means hypothalamus.
Yeah.
And it's attached to some epinephrine in kidneys, and
Yeah.
we secretion as emotion.
Yeah, yeah. You're sort of a more, I guess a more kind of simple part of your brain is reacting to those emotions, releasing certain hormones. And it's incredible, right? Is anyone watching? Nobody's watching Ted Lasso, are they? On Apple TV? Huh? Ted Lasso? It's about an American football coach that gets hired by an English soccer team, like football team, to coach their team, even though he doesn't even know how to play soccer or football. He just knows American football. It's a great show. And a couple weeks ago, in an episode, it was they did the exact same thing, right? They know how to, to make you feel a certain way in the story. And yeah, like I felt it. I got a little teary, and it's amazing that it works, but it does, And again, it's fake. They're all actors. They're just saying their lines and things like that. But when you structure something with a story, then it really communicates with humans. And it's really interesting that that's the kind of animal that we are. And it's also very interesting to think that thousands of years ago in Sumeria, in Mesopotamia, people were like that too. Right? They didn't have film, they didn't have movie, but like Jonathan points out, they had their hands, right, and their voice and their face, and they could tell the story, right, and make people feel things. Really cool. Okay, break time now? No?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, nobody said anything. I can't read your minds, Okay, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I forget what we'll do. We'll do something. All right, so we are back. So important things to remember. Well, again, Jonathan Gottschall's argument here is that humans are storytelling animals, and story is one of the things that makes humans different from everything else on the planet, right? And he's basically saying that not only do we like stories and use stories and are we entertained by stories, but we actually need them, right? It's a fundamental way in which we understand our lives, right? The way we kind of figure out who we are, right? Who are you as a person? Who are you? Well, part of your understanding is that it's based on your story, right? The things that have happened to you that you've kind of assembled into a story of your life, right? You understand who you are based on the story behind you, right? And so for understanding our world, for understanding life, for understanding ourselves, story is important, right? And again, it was just as important for the ancient Mesopotamians as well. And again, keep in mind, and maybe next time you're engaged in a story, whether you're reading or watching, pay attention to that idea that you are feeling the same emotions as some of the characters on screen, right? You're not just watching them, you're participating, right? You're feeling with them at the same time. The other thing I just want to mention quickly, because it's kind of cool, but we don't have a lot of time to deal with it, is the idea of the hero's journey, okay? And the hero's journey is kind of an interesting idea. The idea was thought up by Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was an academic, I think a historian, and was super into ancient myths. And what he did is he was studying all of these ancient myths, and what he thought he found was that really all of these characters seem to go through a lot of the same stages, right, in their story. And in the video we watched yesterday with the Epic of Gilgamesh, Mike Rugnetta was talking about that, right? He was saying, oh, this is that part of the journey and this part. And so this is kind of what he was talking about, is that Joseph Campbell felt that really all heroes' journeys were kind of the same. They went through the same stages. The details were different, right? Who the characters are and what the characters want and what they have to go through to get what they want. Yeah, all that's different. But the basic structure of the story, he thought, was very, very similar. Which is pretty interesting, right? Because Jonathan Gottschall was saying, well, you know, we're all the same. We all like to tell stories. And Joseph Campbell's saying, yeah, and sometimes we're actually telling the same one, right? It doesn't matter if you're in ancient Mesopotamia or modern Canada or ancient Greece or ancient China or wherever you are, these heroes' journeys are all built the same way, okay? And so there's a bunch of stages. I think there's like 16 stages to the hero's journey. But basically, there's 3 chunks, right? Where the hero goes out on an adventure, they figure out how to, exist in this new situation, trying to get what they want, and then they come home having achieved it, or having achieved something, right? So let me just jump ahead here to sorry, I've got a few extra slides. Yeah, so this is kind of what Joseph Campbell thought he was seeing, right? And you can probably, I don't know if you can imagine just by looking, but there are a lot of stories that fit this mold, right? Aryan, you were mentioning Star Wars earlier, right? Yeah. Star Wars follows this pattern perfectly. Because George Lucas, who created Star Wars, he read Joseph Campbell's book, and George Lucas was big into world mythology. And so George Lucas actually wrote Star Wars in order to fit the hero's journey. It fits perfectly. And again, the Epic of Gilgamesh can be seen this way. Other world myths can be seen this way. Harry Potter can be seen this way. Harry Potter follows the hero's journey. Has anyone seen The Matrix? Like from 20 years ago? The Matrix. Yeah. the Matrix follows this hero's journey as well, right? So we have a hero, a person who's kind of living in their regular world, and then there's a call to adventure, right? Something sets them out on some sort of a new path, right? And so for Star Wars, Luke encounters Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? And Obi-Wan tells him about how he knew his father and they used to fight against the Empire. And then Luke's aunt and uncle are killed, and suddenly he's off into space to rescue Princess Leia, right? And he's sent off into another world, right? So he's got his home world on Tatooine where not much is happening and he's kind of bored, and suddenly he's catapulted into a special world, right? He's off in space. He meets new friends, right? Like Han Solo and Chewbacca. They go off, they rescue the princess, and then he kind of comes back changed, right? He's learning to be a Jedi now, and he's rescued the princess, right? And he's a new person, right? He's fighting the Empire. He's a rebel now, right? And so many stories kind of follow this same pattern. Again, the details are all a little bit different. Lord of the Rings? Any Lord of the Rings fans? No?
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings follows the hero's journey as well.
Can we say like in Vikings? Because it's, when I see these 12 rules, Vikings obeys all of these 12 rules.
It's possible. I
Like
don't.
Game of Thrones like this, but it's like just
Game of Thrones?
yeah. It had like some imaginary.
I'm sure that some parts of Game of Thrones, like for some characters, I bet you they do follow this. Yeah, they'll follow this journey, and I guarantee you that George R.R. Martin knows about the hero's journey and how it works. I don't know if he used it on purpose, but I would bet money that he knows what this is. But yeah, and again, I don't know, there's people that think that Joseph Campbell is correct. There are people that think that Joseph Campbell is, no, you're overgeneralizing, you're seeing something that's not there. But it is interesting to think about how many stories fit this kind of mold, right? That kind of follow the same sequence of events, even though, again, the details are different, right? Are you going into the forest with Enkidu to fight the Humbaba, or are you going into space with Obi-Wan Kenobi to fight Darth Vader, right? Those are completely different stories, but again, they follow the same kind of beats, right? The same kind of events. I want to hear your thoughts on this, because let's just pretend that Joseph Campbell is correct, okay? And that there's something kind of, for some reason, lots of cultures are telling the same story over and over again. How do you think that happened? Why do you think different people, different cultures, different times, different circumstances, different technology, why do you think we kind of have the tendency to tell this familiar story over and over again? It's what? Say that one more time. Yeah. But why? Right. So I guess there's something about the sort of narrative structure that you suggested, or about this narrative structure. There's something that people are responding to, right? People hear a story like this and they're like, oh, that's satisfying, right? And I understand it, and it makes sense to me that things would happen like this, right? But why? Why does a journey like this make sense to humans?
Maybe their life will happen. They will only a similar event or similar situation in the story. So I'm
Like in your own life?
maybe, yeah.
Maybe.
And they were they got generally in the story. In fact, they are just really farming, and they just farm for a whole life.
Right. But Okay, so maybe it reflects their life, and maybe it doesn't, right? Some of us have boring lives. But even if you had a boring farmer's life, right? Even if you were just farming for your whole life, could you apply this model to the story of your life?
It depends on how you apply it.
Maybe it's also because it's more logical for me to like look at it step by step, not like from the ordinary world to the order all of a sudden.
Yeah. So it makes sense in terms of our kind of expectations for how things happen, right? You don't just go from one thing to another. There's usually a progression of events,
But
right?
we have already seen that ordinary world, special world, like we can see that at first we are born, how happen like we remember the technology was going to be has fastest development.
Yeah.
And I think we are experiencing.
Maybe. Here's a crazy.
Not as much as our parents, but experience.
Maybe, yeah. Here's a crazy idea. Tell me if I'm insane. Could we imagine that all of you are on your own hero's journey? Right? Now, maybe not in life, but we could get to that. But like, what if you're in a special world now, right? You're all from another country, right? You were all living in that other country with, everything kind of being normal. And then somehow, at some point, you were called to adventure, right? You were called to enter into this other world, right? And so you crossed the threshold, you got on a plane, and you came over here, right? And now you're in this special world, you're in this different place, which is different from your normal, ordinary world, right? And you're meeting friends, right? And you're being tested. You're going through an ordeal. Hopefully not too much of an ordeal, but maybe somewhat. And then eventually you're going to arrive back, right? You're eventually going to go. Maybe you'll go back home. Maybe you'll go somewhere else. I don't know, but you'll come back with something, right? Maybe with a high school diploma, maybe with an associate degree, maybe with a university degree, maybe just with some sort of better knowledge or understanding of who you are and what you want in your life. But I don't know, is that insane to think that all of you are kind of on a little mini hero's journey of your own?
Like, it depends how you think about it.
Sure, it depends how you think about it. But could you think about it that way?
You can.
You can. But does it make sense that way?
Yeah, it is still a journey, but like maybe not that exciting to the story all the time. It's still a journey.
Yeah, it's true. But I don't know. I think I kind of like to think about that. I think I kind of like to think about the idea that you all are on a hero's journey in a way, right? Your own journey, and then you'll come back with some sort of reward, right? Hopefully, and I don't know what the reward will be, right? I don't know if it will be experience, or knowledge, or a degree or a diploma of some sort, or just a better idea of who you are or what you want. Who knows, right? Again, you don't know what you come back with, right? Look at Gilgamesh, right? What did Gilgamesh set out for? He was looking for immortality, right? The secret to eternal life. And what did he come back with? Bupkis, right? Nothing. But he did come back with knowledge, right? He did understand that, no, we're all mortal, right? And the kind of, the way we live a good life is through, or the way we get to eternal life is through our deeds, right? Through the things that we do. We're not supposed to live forever, but the things that we do can live on after us, right? So he comes home with this, he doesn't come home with what he thought he was going to come home with. He comes home with something different, right? And sometimes that happens too, right? Sometimes the thing that you think you're chasing, that's not really what you get, right? Sometimes for better and sometimes for worse, but sometimes you get something different than you thought you were looking for, right? But still a hero's journey, right? One way or another. And again, I don't know. It's up to you, but I kind of like to. I like to think about it that way. Should we leave it there?
Yeah.
No? Yes?
We go back to hunter-gatherer.
Yeah.
Can we go?
Yeah,
Why
I
do you?
like the life of hunter-gatherer.
I like hunter gatherers too,
Yeah.
but there's far more to.
It's more than following.
There's far more to learn here. You can go back to hunter gatherers on your own time.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will leave it there. Come back tomorrow. I'll return your quizzes tomorrow and we'll review them. A little more on the Sumerians, and then I think I'm going to try and tie up the Sumerians and move on to Egypt, because I've been enjoying the Sumerians, but there's way more to do, so we got to get moving.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's all for today. Thank you for being here. Have a nice afternoon. Good work today. We'll see you tomorrow
Yeah.
on your heroes journeys.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.